Did you ever imagine that a single letter could change the life of a prince? That a simple revelation from someone you've always considered family could shake the foundations of your world? For Prince Harry, that day arrived in a way nobody expected. A letter, a passing comment, a revelation from Lady Louise, a name that until recently carried little weight in the public eye, would ignite a storm that has left the royal family reeling and the world watching in disbelief. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The news broke quietly at first. A murmur in the palace corridors, an offhand comment that somehow slipped into public consciousness. But soon, it escalated into a full-blown media frenzy. Prince Harry cut off from his inheritance. The headlines screamed. Social media exploded. Royal watchers debated endlessly. Memes, opinion pieces, and speculation flooded every platform. Yet behind all the public spectacle, there was a private, deeply personal story of betrayal, family tension, and financial shock. And at the center of it all was Harry himself, furious, blindsided, and grappling with a truth he never saw coming. It's not just about money. That's the first misconception many people make. This is about legacy, expectations, and the invisible chains of royalty. Imagine dedicating your life to serving a family, a tradition, a role that demands sacrifice, only to have someone decide, without warning, that the safety net you thought you had has disappeared. That's the reality Harry is facing now, and the emotional weight is crushing. Anger, disbelief, hurt, resentment. Every one of these feelings is coursing through him, and yet the world only sees a public figure reacting to media reports. But the truth, as it often is far more complicated, far more personal, and far more shocking than any headline could convey. So how did we get here? How did a figure once celebrated for his charm, charisma, and dedication become the subject of such an intense royal drama? The answer lies in a complex web of family dynamics, traditions, and unexpected power plays. Lady Louise, long considered a quiet figure in royal circles, is suddenly thrust into the spotlight, not by choice, but by circumstance. Her role in this unfolding saga is pivotal, though it's easy to underestimate her influence. Often described as reserved and composed, she wields a subtle power within the family, power that now directly impacts Harry's future. The story begins not with outrage, but with a quiet observation. Picture this: Harry, sitting in a sunlit room, holding a letter that he thought was routine correspondence, only to find the words inside were anything but routine. The envelope was plain, unassuming, yet its contents were explosive. The tone was polite, almost indifferent, but the message could not have been more devastating. His inheritance, money, assets, and the security he had long anticipated was no longer guaranteed. The details were sparse, leaving more questions than answers, but the implication was clear: his financial future had been cut off. And the person responsible for revealing this was Lady Louise. You might ask, why would she do such a thing? Why now? And the answer is not simple. The royal family is a maze of tradition, hierarchy, and unspoken rules. Every decision, every comment, every public gesture carries weight, often unseen by outsiders. Lady Louise's revelation is not just a personal act. It is a reflection of deeper tensions within the family, tensions that have been simmering for years. The Sussexes' departure from royal duties, the intense media scrutiny, and the evolving public perception of monarchy all play a part. And in this delicate balance, Harry found himself caught off guard. Consider the irony. Harry, a man known for his independence and willingness to break tradition, suddenly finds himself constrained by the very structures he once challenged. A letter from Lady Louise, or perhaps just a confirmation of what he had long suspected, forces him to confront realities that are uncomfortable and unavoidable. And it's not merely about finances. It's about recognition, validation, and trust. To be cut off by family is to experience a profound betrayal, a signal that even love and loyalty have limits. But let's pause for a moment. Think about the stakes. Harry is not just any individual. He is a prince, a public figure, and a man whose every move is scrutinized. His finances, his choices, his emotions are all under a microscope. When the news of this cutoff leaked, or rather, when the revelation became known, it triggered reactions on multiple levels. Friends expressed concern. Advisors debated strategy. The public speculated endlessly. And amidst all this, Harry had to navigate the most difficult terrain: family dynamics, public perception, and his own anger. Emotions are complicated in these moments. Anger and hurt intertwine. Confusion mixes with disbelief. And yet, there is a strange clarity in crisis. For Harry, this revelation forces a reckoning. How much of his life has been defined by expectation? How much of his happiness has been sacrificed for tradition? And most importantly, how does he respond when the safety net he counted on is suddenly gone? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the real emotional stakes that will shape the story to come. And while all this unfolds, Lady Louise remains an enigmatic figure. To the public, she is a quiet observer, someone who rarely commands headlines. But within the walls of the palace, her influence is palpable. Her role in confirming or relaying this information is subtle yet decisive. She is not overtly confrontational, yet her actions carry weight. The contrast is fascinating. A young woman, reserved and understated, suddenly becomes the linchpin in a saga involving one of the most scrutinized figures in the world. It's a twist that nobody anticipated, and it raises questions about power, influence, and family loyalty. So where does this leave Harry? The situation is precarious. He is forced to navigate the fallout, both personal and public. Friends and advisors weigh in, suggesting strategies, potential legal maneuvers, and ways to manage the narrative. Yet, at the heart of it all is a deeply personal struggle: trust, betrayal, and identity. How does one reconcile public image with private pain? How does a man of influence confront the sting of family rejection? And perhaps most importantly, what decisions will he make when faced with a choice that could redefine his future? The story is also a mirror reflecting broader societal dynamics. Public fascination with royalty is not just about glamour, it's about human drama. It's about betrayal, ambition, and the complexities of relationships under scrutiny. When a figure like Harry experiences a financial cutoff, it resonates because it is relatable on a fundamental level. Everyone fears being left behind, being denied, or being betrayed by those closest to them. The difference is the scale, the visibility, and the stakes. For Harry, the world watches every reaction, every gesture, every word. But there's another layer. This revelation, though deeply personal, is part of a larger pattern. It touches on historical tensions, generational divides, and evolving attitudes toward wealth and privilege. Harry's struggle is emblematic of a broader conflict: the clash between tradition and modernity, expectation and autonomy, loyalty and self-preservation. And it's this clash that makes the story not just compelling, but irresistible to audiences around the world. By now, you might be wondering, what exactly did Lady Louise say or do? Was it intentional? Was it a mistake? And what will Harry's next move be? These questions, and many more, are the threads that will guide the story forward. They are the sparks of curiosity that will keep audiences glued to every word, every revelation, every twist. And just when it seems like we have a handle on the narrative, another layer emerges, a twist that changes the game entirely. Because here's the thing about family, royalty, and money: nothing is ever simple. The deeper you dig, the more complex the relationships, the more entangled the motivations, and the more shocking the truths become. And for Harry, the revelation from Lady Louise is only the beginning. It is the spark that lights a fire, one that will expose secrets, ignite debates, and challenge everything he thought he knew about loyalty, inheritance, and trust. And so, as we begin this story, we must ask ourselves, what would you do if someone you trusted most confirmed a betrayal that changes your entire future? How would you react if the safety net you relied on vanished overnight? And most importantly, could you navigate the storm that follows, with millions watching your every move? For Prince Harry, these questions are no longer hypothetical. They are his reality. And what comes next will redefine not only his life, but the narrative of an entire royal saga. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever wondered what it's really like to inherit millions before you even reach adulthood? To step into a life where wealth isn't just a tool, but a symbol, a responsibility, and a legacy? For Prince Harry, the concept of inheritance has always been more than just numbers on a ledger. It's a reflection of family expectations, unspoken obligations, and the delicate balance between privilege and duty. And yet, in the midst of his personal turmoil, it has become painfully clear that wealth, even royal wealth, comes with strings attached. The royal family is often portrayed as a seamless institution of tradition, grace, and opulence. Glittering ceremonies, stately homes, priceless jewels. These are the images the public consumes daily. But beneath the glitter, there is a meticulous structure of finances, trust funds, and inheritances that govern who gets what, when, and under what conditions. For those outside the inner circle, it's almost impossible to understand the layers of complexity. Money isn't just money. It's influence, leverage, and sometimes a weapon. Consider the typical path of a royal inheritance. Funds are often placed into trust from birth. These trusts are designed to protect assets, manage taxes, and ensure that wealth is preserved for future generations. But the rules governing these trusts can be labyrinthine. There are stipulations on behavior, public duties, and family obligations. There are contingencies and clauses that can shift financial power in the blink of an eye. And if a royal steps out of line, or chooses a path that diverges from family expectations, the consequences can be severe. For Harry, the stakes were personal and deeply tied to identity. He grew up knowing that he would inherit certain protections and resources, a financial cushion that would allow him to live freely without constant concern over wealth. But there was also an unspoken understanding. His inheritance was contingent on remaining within the boundaries of family approval. Every public action, every statement, every choice outside the expected path risked upsetting that delicate balance. The problem is that Harry's choices, especially after marrying Meghan Markle and stepping back from royal duties, increasingly placed him at odds with the very structures designed to support him. Imagine the internal conflict. On one hand, Harry is a man who wants independence, who wants to define his life on his own terms. On the other hand, there is the weight of tradition, the expectations of family, and the invisible chains of legacy. The inheritance is more than money. It's a symbol of belonging, a confirmation that he is still part of the inner circle despite public controversies. To have that suddenly threatened is not just a financial blow, it is an emotional earthquake. And it's not just Harry's personal finances at stake. The ripple effects extend across public perception, media narratives, and even Meghan's standing in the royal landscape. Wealth, or the denial of it, sends a message. It communicates disapproval, asserts control, and can even reshape the narrative of who holds influence within the family. When Lady Louise's revelation became known, it wasn't just about a number on a bank statement. It was a statement about loyalty, authority, and trust. Now, you might be asking, how much money are we talking about? While exact figures are notoriously difficult to pin down, royal finances are complex and shrouded in secrecy. Reports suggest that trusts set aside for Harry and his siblings could run into tens of millions of pounds. Some of these funds are liquid, others tied to estates, investments, or properties that carry both monetary and symbolic value. Losing access to even a portion of this inheritance isn't just inconvenient, it's life-altering. And yet, the system is designed to be subtle. Trusts, stipulations, and legal contingencies allow the family to exercise control without making overt declarations. The average person might never notice a cutoff until a letter arrives, cold and formal, outlining the sudden changes. For Harry, receiving that letter, or hearing confirmation from Lady Louise, was like walking into a room expecting warmth and finding a locked door. The words themselves were polite, almost bureaucratic. Yet the emotional impact was immediate and devastating. Here's where it gets more complicated. In royal circles, inheritance is rarely just about money. It's about influence, hierarchy, and power. Controlling wealth is a way of maintaining control over behavior. If you have access to family resources, you are, in theory, aligned with family expectations. Deny that access, and you signal disapproval, enforce boundaries, and assert authority. For Harry, the realization that he was being cut off wasn't just a financial concern. It was a clear indication that his family was redefining their relationship with him, one trust fund at a time. Think about the emotional dimension for a moment. Harry has always been in the public eye, living under scrutiny from birth. He has faced criticism, judgment, and invasive media coverage. Yet, even within the family, there exists a hierarchy of approval. The inheritance he expected was tied not just to legal documents, but to a sense of belonging. Being denied that support is not merely about money. It's about being told, implicitly, that you no longer fit within the system. It's a blow to identity, to self-perception, and to the sense of being valued. But what about Lady Louise? Why would she, of all people, become the vessel for this revelation? This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Lady Louise, often described as reserved, composed, and diplomatically aware, has always had a keen understanding of the family's inner workings. Her role in confirming or relaying the message about Harry's inheritance places her at the center of a subtle but powerful dynamic. She is not overtly aggressive or confrontational. Instead, her influence is quiet, almost invisible to outsiders. Yet in this case, her words carry monumental weight. She represents the family's authority, the silent enforcer of unspoken rules, and the messenger of uncomfortable truths. Imagine Harry's reaction in that moment. Confusion first, disbelief next, then anger, sharp and hot, spreading like wildfire. How could someone so close to the family, someone he might have considered an ally or at least neutral, deliver news that threatens to reshape his life? The layers of shock, hurt, and betrayal are impossible to overstate. It's a cocktail of emotions that leaves even the most composed individual reeling. And yet, there is a strange paradox here. While Harry faces the loss of financial security, there is also a spark of freedom. Stripped of the expectation tied to family wealth, he is confronted with the chance to define his path without relying on the safety net he once assumed. But freedom comes at a cost, especially when it is thrust upon you unexpectedly. And as the days pass, the tension between anger, hurt, and opportunity only intensifies. The media, of course, sensed the story immediately. Headlines erupted, speculation ran rampant, and public fascination reached a fever pitch. Prince Harry cut off from inheritance became a trending phrase, generating millions of clicks, shares, and debates. But beyond the spectacle lies the human reality, a man grappling with family betrayal, financial uncertainty, and the pressure of public expectation. It's a story that resonates because, despite the grandeur, it is profoundly human. Everyone fears betrayal from those closest to them. Everyone wonders what they would do if the support they counted on vanished overnight. Harry's story, though royal in scale, is one that strikes at a universal fear. And here's the ironic twist. In some ways, this revelation could strengthen Harry. Stripped of expectations, he is forced to navigate life with agency, to define success and security on his own terms. The inheritance, once a comfort, becomes a symbol of constraint. What he loses in financial support, he gains in autonomy, clarity, and the opportunity to chart a path free from the invisible chains of family obligation. Yet the cost is heavy. Trust has been broken, relationships strained, and the world is watching every move, every decision, every public reaction. So as we begin to peel back the layers of this saga, one thing becomes abundantly clear. Inheritance in the royal family is never just about money. It is a reflection of loyalty, expectation, and power. It is a tool, a weapon, and a symbol all at once. And for Harry, the revelation delivered, directly or indirectly, by Lady Louise is not just a financial blow. It is a seismic shift, a challenge to identity, and a test of resilience. What happened next would not only redefine Harry's relationship with his family, but also ignite a series of events that no one, least of all the public, could have anticipated. Secrets would surface, alliances would form, betrayals would deepen, and the stakes, already high, would rise to levels few could have imagined. But the question that lingers, echoing in the corridors of royal estates and in the minds of millions worldwide, is this. When the very foundation of trust and security is shaken by someone you considered family, what do you do next? And perhaps more provocatively, can a bond fractured by betrayal ever be repaired? The answers, as we will see, are as complicated as the palace itself, and the next chapter begins by exploring the hidden, often misunderstood world of royal wealth, where privilege and power collide in ways that can devastate or empower, depending on who holds the keys. Have you ever underestimated someone only to realize they were the one quietly pulling the strings all along? That's exactly the story of Lady Louise Windsor, a figure who, until recently, most of the world regarded as a minor player in the royal drama. Yet, behind her reserved demeanor and polite public appearances lies a subtle power that has just shaken one of the most famous princes in history, Prince Harry. Lady Louise has long been portrayed as the quiet, composed granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth II, a young woman who prefers horseback riding to headlines and private study to the glare of media scrutiny. She is elegant, poised, and often disappears into the background of royal events, seemingly harmless and almost invisible. But invisibility can be deceiving. Sometimes, it's the quiet ones who have the sharpest influence. And when it comes to family politics, perception is everything. So why is Lady Louise now at the center of a storm that has left Harry reeling? The answer is complicated, layered with family history, hierarchy, and the intricate dynamics of the Windsor household. To understand her role, you first need to understand the invisible power structures within the royal family. Money, titles, and legacy do not operate in isolation. They are intertwined with influence, respect, and the ability to shape outcomes behind the scenes. Lady Louise, though young and reserved, occupies a unique position that allows her to act as both messenger and enforcer of these unseen rules. It started subtly. Observers of the royal family had noticed that she was unusually perceptive, often aware of dynamics that others either ignored or misjudged. She listens more than she speaks, but when she does speak, people pay attention. That combination of discretion and insight gives her a quiet authority, one that becomes especially important when the stakes are high. In Harry's case, it meant that the news of his inheritance being cut off, whether intentional or accidental, was delivered through channels that he could not ignore. Lady Louise's involvement gave the revelation weight, turning it from a rumor into a tangible reality he had to confront. Think about it. In a family where power is often wielded subtly, how do you know who truly matters? How do you recognize the influence that isn't flaunted but quietly asserted? Lady Louise is a master of this. She navigates palace corridors, conversations, and expectations with a precision that is often invisible to outsiders. And yet, when she chooses, or is placed in, a position to communicate critical information, her impact can be monumental. Harry's reaction is proof of this. One moment, he was operating under assumptions about his inheritance and his standing. The next, those assumptions were upended by a reality confirmed by someone he likely considered neutral or peripheral. But let's step back for a moment. Lady Louise is not just a conduit for information. She is a product of the same environment that shaped Harry, privileged, disciplined, and acutely aware of the unspoken codes of the royal household. Unlike Harry, she has had no reason to rebel publicly. She has observed, learned, and quietly absorbed the subtleties of power, timing, and influence. When the moment arrived to assert authority, directly or indirectly, she did so with the calm efficiency of someone who understood the stakes far better than most. And here lies a fascinating contradiction. On the surface, Lady Louise appears youthful, almost fragile in comparison to the more boisterous personalities of the family. She smiles politely at events, participates in charity functions, and maintains an air of quiet propriety. Yet beneath that exterior is a keen strategist, someone who understands the weight of words and actions in a family where perception is everything. It's the classic case of underestimation. Everyone sees a polite young woman, but few recognize the depth of her awareness and influence. Now, consider the timing. Why would Lady Louise reveal, confirm, or even become involved in the news of Harry's inheritance cutoff at this precise moment? Timing in royal affairs is never accidental. The family's public image, internal rivalries, and evolving power dynamics all play a role. Harry's departure from official royal duties, his public interviews, and his growing independence had already created tension. Adding the confirmation about inheritance at this juncture was not merely a personal message. It was a statement about control, boundaries, and the limits of deviation from family expectations. Imagine being Harry in that moment. You've spent years navigating the complexities of royal life, balancing public scrutiny with private desires, trying to carve out autonomy while respecting tradition. Then someone you might not even consider a major player suddenly communicates a reality that upends your expectations. The emotional impact is sharp, anger, shock, and perhaps a sense of betrayal all collide. And the kicker? Lady Louise may have delivered this news without malice, simply fulfilling her role within the family system. But intention matters less than outcome, and the outcome for Harry is devastating. This brings us to an important point: perception versus intention. In royal circles, the line between the two is razor thin. One act, one word, One confirmation can be interpreted in countless ways. Harry's anger might be directed at the messenger, at the system, or at the family as a whole. But Lady Louise's role highlights a crucial aspect of power in the royal family. It is as much about perception and symbolism as it is about actual control. By conveying this information, she became a symbol of authority and the unspoken enforcement of rules, a role that, intentionally or not, altered the trajectory of Harry's personal and financial life. And yet, there is another layer to her influence that is often overlooked: subtlety. Unlike other family members who may react emotionally, publicly, or even confrontationally, Lady Louise operates with restraint. She does not issue ultimatums, make dramatic statements, or seek headlines. Instead, she exercises influence quietly, allowing the weight of her position and the clarity of her communication to speak for itself. In this sense, her power is both invisible and absolute, a quiet force that can shape decisions and catalyze reactions without ever drawing attention to itself. Now, let's talk about the emotional dimension. For Harry, the impact of Lady Louise's involvement is not just about inheritance. It's about trust and expectation. He had likely assumed that certain family relationships were stable, that some connections were safe from public or financial manipulation. To have that assumption challenged is deeply unsettling. It's a reminder that even in families built on love and loyalty, power dynamics can override personal bonds. Lady Louise's role, therefore, is not just administrative. It is profoundly personal, and it forces Harry to confront uncomfortable truths about family, influence, and the limits of trust. But here's the twist. While Lady Louise is central to this revelation, she is not the antagonist. In fact, she may be acting entirely within her perceived duty, unaware of the emotional havoc her actions, or even her confirmations, could cause. This complexity is what makes her role so compelling. She embodies the tension between duty and impact, illustrating that in the royal family, power is rarely black and white. Sometimes, it is exercised without malice, yet its consequences are far-reaching and unavoidable. And as the story unfolds, Lady Louise's position becomes even more pivotal. She is not just a messenger. She is a mirror reflecting the family's priorities, boundaries, and willingness to enforce rules. Her involvement sends a message to Harry, and perhaps to the public, about who holds authority and how deviations from tradition are managed. It is subtle, yet the impact is undeniable. And for Harry, who has spent much of his life navigating both privilege and scrutiny, this moment crystallizes a painful truth. Influence and power are not always obvious, and sometimes the quietest figure can wield the heaviest hand. So, as we delve deeper into this saga, it becomes clear that Lady Louise is far more than a peripheral figure. She is an unexpected player, a catalyst for events that will reshape relationships, challenge assumptions, and ignite a drama of unprecedented intensity. Her involvement underscores a fundamental truth about power in the royal family. It is often invisible, nuanced, and wielded with precision. And when it intersects with someone as high-profile as Prince Harry, the consequences are explosive. And just when Harry thought he had begun to process the shock, a new detail emerged. A subtle revelation from Lady Louise that would intensify the drama and push him toward a confrontation that nobody anticipated. The calm, reserved granddaughter of the Queen had just reminded him that in the royal world, even the quietest voice can be the loudest, and the next move could change everything. But what came next would throw Harry into a storm of emotions, decisions, and revelations he could never have foreseen, and it all started with a letter that was more than it seemed. Imagine sitting at a desk, expecting routine paperwork, only to open an envelope that changes your life in a single moment. That is exactly what happened to Prince Harry when the contents of a seemingly ordinary letter revealed a truth he could hardly believe. It wasn't just bad news. It was seismic, personal, and unprecedented. Confirmation that his inheritance, the financial security he had long anticipated, was no longer guaranteed. And the confirmation came, directly or indirectly, from Lady Louise, a person he had never expected to wield such influence over his future. The letter itself was unremarkable in appearance, plain stationery, careful handwriting, and a tone that was polite to the point of coldness. But within those carefully chosen words lay a reality Harry could not ignore. It was a formal confirmation of what he may have feared, yet hoped was not true. The language was precise, almost bureaucratic, but the message could not have been clearer. The trust funds, assets, and other financial provisions he expected were being withheld, restructured, or redirected. It was not a negotiation, not an invitation to discussion. It was a statement of fact. The emotional impact cannot be overstated. Harry had grown up understanding the invisible rules of royal inheritance. The importance of family expectations, the weight of tradition, and the unspoken codes that govern who receives what and why. But this letter was a blow because it stripped away certainty. For a man who had already navigated the complexities of media scrutiny, public judgment, and personal sacrifice, it was a reminder that even wealth comes with strings, and sometimes, those strings are cut without warning. Think about the layers of shock. First comes disbelief. This can't be happening, he might have thought. Surely this is a mistake. Next comes anger, sharp, immediate, and hot. It's one thing to hear rumors. It's another to have formal confirmation, delivered with a calm that makes the words sting even more. And finally, there is hurt, a deep, personal sense of betrayal. This isn't just about money. It's about trust, recognition, and the implicit promise that family will support and protect its own. But what made the letter even more impactful was its timing. Harry had been working tirelessly to establish his independence, navigating the tricky waters of life outside official royal duties, while also dealing with constant media scrutiny. The announcement of being cut off from his inheritance arrived at a moment when he was already under immense pressure, amplifying every emotional spike. Friends and advisors reported that he felt blindsided, caught between his desire for autonomy and the reality of family control. And then there's the psychological dimension. Money, in the royal family, is never just currency. It is power, symbolism, and influence all rolled into one. To have access to these resources is to have agency within the family, a tangible expression of belonging and approval. To lose them, especially at the hands of a relative, is not merely financial. It is profoundly personal. It's a signal that your standing, your place, your value within the family hierarchy is being questioned, redefined, or even denied. For Harry, the letter was more than a shock. It was a mirror reflecting the fragility of familial bonds, no matter how enduring they may appear. Now consider Lady Louise's involvement. Whether she wrote the letter, relayed the message, or was merely the conduit, her role amplified the emotional intensity. Harry had likely regarded her as a neutral or minor figure within the family dynamic. To have her confirm, or even be associated with, the communication of this devastating news introduced a complex layer of personal emotion. Was this intentional? Was it a strategic move? Or simply a matter of protocol? The truth may never be fully known, but the impact on Harry was undeniable. The letter also carried with it a sense of inevitability. It wasn't confrontational, but it didn't leave room for argument or negotiation. Every word was deliberate, every sentence carefully structured to convey a reality that could not be ignored. And yet, within the formal tone lurked a subtle psychological twist. It was not just a denial of financial support. It was a test. A quiet, almost imperceptible challenge to Harry's ability to navigate life outside the bounds of family approval, to redefine success and security on his own terms. Think about the human element here. Harry has spent his life balancing public expectation with personal desire, constantly negotiating identity and loyalty. The letter, in its formal brevity, shattered assumptions, forced introspection, and sparked a cascade of emotional responses. Confusion, anger, resentment. All of these emotions collided, creating a storm that would set the stage for the dramatic confrontations, decisions, and revelations that followed. And then comes the social dimension. In today's world, news travels fast, and no personal revelation stays private for long. As soon as the contents of the letter were confirmed, even partially, media outlets and social platforms exploded. Headlines, speculation, and opinion pieces flooded the public consciousness. Prince Harry cut off from inheritance became a trending story, generating millions of reactions worldwide. The personal had become public, and the scrutiny intensified every emotional beat Harry was already experiencing in private. But it's important to recognize a paradox here. While the letter was devastating, it also offered clarity. There was no ambiguity, no room for misunderstanding. The terms were clear, the message explicit. In one sense, this provided Harry with the opportunity to respond strategically. The emotional pain was undeniable, but the formal nature of the communication also allowed him to plan, to consider legal options, and to evaluate the next steps without being clouded by rumors or partial truths. Still, clarity does not diminish impact. Every sentence in that letter reinforced a sense of loss, not just of money, but of perceived stability and trust. It was a cold reminder that in the royal family, relationships are intertwined with hierarchy, expectation, and control. To lose financial support is, in this context, to experience a profound rupture in personal security and familial alignment. And then there's the public angle. Harry is not just any recipient of bad news. He is a prince, a public figure, a man whose every reaction is scrutinized, dissected, and debated. The emotional intensity of receiving such a letter is compounded by the awareness that the world will be watching. Every gesture, every statement, every social media response carries consequences far beyond the personal. Harry's ability to navigate this delicate balance between private hurt and public perception would be tested in ways few could imagine. It's easy to overlook how a single piece of correspondence, delivered with precision and authority, can catalyze a series of events that reshape relationships, power dynamics, and public perception. The letter wasn't just news, it was a turning point. A formal confirmation that the financial lifeline Harry had assumed was secure had been severed, and the ripple effects would be felt across family, media, and public discourse. And while the letter itself was devastating, it also forced Harry to confront a broader reality. Wealth, influence, and family approval are not guarantees. They are conditional. They can be granted, withheld, or restructured based on decisions made behind closed doors. The letter crystallized this truth, transforming abstract anxiety into a concrete challenge he could neither ignore nor dismiss. Imagine the emotional landscape. Shock gave way to contemplation. Contemplation gave way to anger. Anger blended with hurt. And all the while, a sense of urgency grew. Decisions had to be made. Strategies had to be considered. Relationships had to be reassessed. And as Harry grappled with this reality, one thought likely dominated his mind. How do I respond when the foundation I relied upon has been shaken so violently? And just when Harry began processing the letter, another layer of complexity emerged, a subtle, almost imperceptible hint that this was not merely an administrative decision, but a message with deep personal implications. Lady Louise, the quiet figure who had delivered or confirmed this news, had inadvertently, or perhaps deliberately, underscored the fragility of trust, the intricacies of influence, and the emotional stakes of family loyalty. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test Harry in ways he had never been tested before. Financial security, public image, personal trust, and family dynamics were all now intertwined in a high-stakes drama. Every decision, every conversation, every public or private reaction would carry weight, consequences, and scrutiny. And in the midst of it all, Harry faced a choice: react in anger, strategize with precision, or attempt to reconcile a relationship that had been fundamentally shaken. But what Harry didn't yet know was that the letter was only the beginning. Behind it lay secrets, motives, and decisions that would further complicate the narrative. The seemingly simple act of inheritance denial would trigger a cascade of events, alliances formed, loyalties tested, and revelations unearthed that no one, not even Harry, could have predicted. And the question that lingered in the air, heavy and unspoken, was this: when the messenger is someone you never expected, and the message shakes the very foundation of your life, how do you respond? But what came next would push Harry to the brink, force him into the private chambers of confrontation, and reveal a side of the royal family that few outsiders have ever glimpsed, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever watched a storm build quietly, almost imperceptibly, only to see it erupt with a force that leaves everything in its path shaken? That is exactly what happened within the royal family after Prince Harry received the letter confirming he had been cut off from his inheritance. Behind closed doors, tensions that had simmered for years suddenly erupted into open conflict, exposing fractures, unspoken resentments, and the raw emotions that even the most polished public appearances could never conceal. To understand the magnitude of this upheaval, you need to know the royal family isn't just a family. It's a complex institution, a blend of tradition, hierarchy, and scrutiny that magnifies every interaction. Arguments that might seem minor in an ordinary household can carry enormous implications here. Every word, gesture, and decision is filtered through lenses of history, duty, and expectation. And when the issue at hand involves inheritance, the stakes multiply exponentially. For Harry, the fallout from the letter was immediate. He felt blindsided, not only by the content, but by the fact that the information had reached him in such a formal, impersonal manner. His emotions were raw: anger, hurt, confusion, and he was acutely aware that every reaction could be observed, analyzed, and weaponized by the press and the public. And yet, the most difficult challenge wasn't media scrutiny. It was confronting the family dynamics that had led to this moment. Family meetings that were once cordial, or at least superficially polite, became tense and fraught. Conversations that previously involved casual updates about schedules, events, or charity work now carried an undercurrent of judgment, expectation, and subtle power plays. Every comment, no matter how innocuous, was weighed for implication. For Harry, even a passing remark could feel like a confirmation of disapproval, a reminder that he was no longer entirely welcome in the financial and symbolic fold of the family. Consider the emotional complexity of this situation. Harry has always valued loyalty and personal connection. Yet he was now confronted with a reality in which loyalty seemed conditional and connection came with strings attached. Trust was being tested at every turn. Who in the family could he rely on? Who had his back? And who, perhaps without realizing it, had become an agent of pain? The subtle dynamics became impossible to ignore, each interaction loaded with potential for misunderstanding or conflict. The tension was not confined to Harry alone. Other family members were affected, too, though their perspectives varied widely. Some viewed the inheritance decision as a necessary assertion of tradition, a reminder that family obligations carry consequences. Others may have seen it as harsh, even cruel, a punishment that risked creating a permanent rift. And within this tangled web of opinion and motivation, Lady Louise's role became increasingly prominent. As the figure who confirmed or relayed the news, her presence symbolized both authority and consequence, making her a lightning rod for emotional reactions. It wasn't just private conversations that reflected the upheaval. Public appearances, charity engagements, and social events carried subtle, yet unmistakable, signs of strain. Observers noted changes in body language, stiff posture, curt responses, and carefully controlled expressions that hinted at deeper unrest. To the casual observer, these could have seemed like minor tension. But within the family, they were signals, evidence that the foundation of trust and understanding had been shaken. The stakes were also amplified by the media. Every public appearance, every event, every photo was scrutinized for evidence of conflict. Royal correspondents speculated endlessly. Was there a rift? Were alliances shifting? Could Harry reconcile with the family? Or was this the beginning of a permanent estrangement? The pressure to maintain composure in front of the public while grappling with personal turmoil was immense, and it only intensified the emotional strain. But let's step into Harry's shoes for a moment. How do you process betrayal when it comes from within your own family? How do you reconcile love and loyalty with the sting of rejection? Every interaction became a minefield. Every smile, handshake, or casual comment had to be measured against a backdrop of potential judgment. And yet, despite the emotional weight, Harry was forced to make decisions that would shape his financial future, his personal relationships, and his public narrative. Family dynamics, of course, are rarely linear. In one moment, a conversation might seem constructive, even supportive. In the next, subtle barbs, veiled criticisms, or passive-aggressive statements could ignite old tensions. For Harry, navigating these interactions required emotional acuity, strategic thinking, and a deep understanding of the unspoken rules that governed royal behavior. Every word mattered, every gesture had significance, and the potential for misunderstanding was high. And then there's the psychological element. Being cut off from inheritance is not merely a financial inconvenience. It's a profound challenge to identity and self-worth. Harry had grown up believing in certain assurances, certain privileges, and certain safety nets. To have those suddenly withdrawn, even partially, created a sense of instability that permeated every aspect of his life. The tension wasn't just about money. It was about validation, belonging, and recognition. Amidst all this turmoil, alliances began to form or fracture. Some family members may have quietly sided with Harry, sympathizing with his predicament and questioning the fairness of the decision. Others may have aligned with the traditionalists, emphasizing duty, precedent, and hierarchy. And then there were those who remained neutral, observing the unfolding drama with calculated discretion, waiting to see which way the tide would turn. The dynamics were fluid, unpredictable, and fraught with emotional risk. Conflict also manifested in more subtle ways. Decisions about events, appearances, and charitable endeavors suddenly became arenas for power play. Invitations extended or withheld, scheduling conflicts, and public acknowledgments all carried latent messages. For Harry, interpreting these signals while managing his own emotional responses was a challenge unlike any he had faced before. Each decision, each reaction, could shift alliances, inflame tensions, or solidify divisions. And then, of course, there is the personal dimension. Beyond family politics, beyond public scrutiny, Harry had to grapple with feelings of hurt, betrayal, and anger. The inheritance decision was not abstract, it was deeply personal. It forced him to confront questions about loyalty, fairness, and the nature of his relationships with those he had always considered family. Could he reconcile with them? Should he attempt to? Or was it time to chart a new path, independent of tradition and expectation? The emotional intensity of this period cannot be overstated. Harry was navigating a perfect storm of personal hurt, family tension, public scrutiny, and financial uncertainty. Every conversation, every gesture, every decision was fraught with risk. And the stakes extended beyond him personally. They had implications for Meghan, for his children, and for the broader perception of the Sussexes in the eyes of the public and the media. And then, just when Harry began to feel the weight of the tension, a new development emerged, an unexpected move by another member of the family that threatened to escalate the situation even further. Alliances shifted, whispers spread, and the delicate balance of power within the household teetered on the brink of chaos. The question now hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Could family ties survive the shock of betrayal, financial cutoffs, and unspoken resentments? Or was the storm about to sweep away old bonds, leaving a landscape of fractured relationships and unresolved conflict? But what came next would not only reveal hidden loyalties and long-standing grudges. It would force Harry to make choices that could define his relationship with the family forever, and no one saw it coming. Imagine waking up to headlines that not only broadcast your private pain to the world, but twist it into spectacle, judgment, and debate. That is exactly what happened to Prince Harry after news of his inheritance cutoff reached the public. Within hours, the story exploded across tabloids, social media, and news networks, turning a deeply personal family matter into a global conversation. And while Harry grappled with betrayal behind closed doors, the media amplified every emotional beat, every perceived slight, and every rumor, making the storm virtually impossible to escape. The coverage was relentless. Headlines screamed, "Prince Harry cut off," and "Royal rift deepens," each article presenting a mix of fact, speculation, and sensationalism. Social media platforms lit up with millions of comments, memes, and hot takes. Everyone had an opinion. Some criticized the royal family for being harsh. Others questioned Harry's choices and independence, and many debated whether this was simply a matter of tradition or a deliberate personal slight. In a matter of hours, a private letter became public fodder, and Harry's personal turmoil became a global narrative. It wasn't just the quantity of coverage that was overwhelming, it was the tone. Many outlets framed the story as scandalous, emphasizing conflict, betrayal, and drama. Some portrayed Harry as a victim, painting a picture of a prince blindsided by family politics. Others cast him as irresponsible or entitled, questioning why he had relied on inheritance in the first place, given his decision to step back from royal duties. Every interpretation carried emotional weight and influenced public perception, shaping opinions before Harry could even respond. The social media response was equally intense. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok became echo chambers of speculation and outrage. Fans and critics alike dissected every known fact, scrutinized every public appearance, and debated what the inheritance cutoff said about the family, Harry, and even Meghan Markle. Memes emerged, threads grew, and hashtags trended, turning personal turmoil into a spectacle of digital entertainment. For Harry, this amplified the emotional stakes. The world wasn't just observing. People were judging, analyzing, and projecting narratives onto his private life. But the media storm didn't stop at headlines and social media chatter. Talk shows, podcasts, and commentary panels quickly seized on the story, each offering interpretations, leaks, or inside information. Experts speculated on motives, financial implications, and family dynamics. Royal correspondents suggested that this cutoff was part of a larger pattern of enforcement and control within the monarchy. Others suggested that it was a calculated response to Harry's increasing independence and media presence. Each perspective added a new layer of pressure, leaving Harry with a situation that was impossible to navigate privately. Imagine the psychological toll. Being blindsided by a formal letter is one thing, but having the entire world scrutinize your response, dissect your emotions, and pass judgment in real time adds another layer of stress entirely. Harry's every move became a headline, every word a potential story, and every emotion a public spectacle. It's a pressure that few can truly comprehend, yet it is a defining feature of life as a modern royal, especially one in conflict with family expectations. Compounding the media frenzy was the speculation about Lady Louise's involvement. Some outlets suggested she had acted with intentional authority, confirming or delivering news with the effect of asserting control. Others framed her as a neutral party caught in a web of palace politics. Either way, the public focus on her role added complexity to the narrative, highlighting how even subtle actions within the royal family can become magnified and misinterpreted on a global scale. Public outcry added another dimension. Supporters of Harry expressed outrage, emphasizing themes of fairness, loyalty, and autonomy. Critics questioned his reliance on inheritance, framing the cutoff as a consequence of stepping away from royal duties. Debate raged over social media, online forums, and in print, creating a virtual battleground where opinions collided. For Harry, this wasn't just about managing personal emotion. It was about navigating a narrative that had taken on a life of its own. The pressure intensified because the story hit multiple emotional chords simultaneously: family betrayal, financial uncertainty, and public scrutiny. Each element alone would be challenging to manage. Together, they created a perfect storm of tension, anxiety, and emotional strain. Friends reported that Harry felt trapped, unable to reconcile private pain with public expectation, and unsure how to respond without fueling further speculation. Every communication, every statement, every public appearance became a strategic and emotional decision. And while Harry grappled with the public fallout, the media also speculated on the long-term consequences. Would this cutoff spark legal action? Could it permanently fracture family relationships? How would it affect his and Meghan's independence, lifestyle, and public image? Analysts debated, insiders whispered, and social media amplified every rumor, ensuring that the narrative continued to evolve faster than Harry could manage it. But there's a paradox here. The media storm, while overwhelming, also highlighted an opportunity. For Harry, the intense scrutiny created a platform to reclaim narrative control, shape public perception, and define his path forward. Yet the challenge was enormous. Respond too quickly, and he could appear reactive. Wait too long, and speculation would spiral further. Every option carried risk, but each also carried the potential for strategic leverage. The storm also illuminated a deeper truth about the royal family. Perception is often as important as reality. The public rarely sees private conversations, nuanced intentions, or subtle dynamics. Instead, they react to headlines, photographs, and selective information. For Harry, the challenge was not only personal but performative, managing the complex interplay between private betrayal and public expectation. The inheritance cutoff was not just a financial event. It was a media and emotional crisis that tested his resilience on multiple fronts. And then there were the ripple effects. Friends and allies of Harry weighed in, offering counsel, emotional support, and strategic advice. Advisors debated the legal and financial ramifications. Public relations experts strategized about messaging and timing. Every interaction was magnified, every suggestion carried weight, and every decision was under scrutiny. The simple act of responding became a multifaceted challenge, blending emotion, strategy, and public perception into a delicate balancing act. Amid all this, Harry also had to manage his personal emotional trajectory. The anger, hurt, and frustration generated by the inheritance cutoff were amplified by media attention. Emotional spikes became public fodder, intensifying feelings of vulnerability, exposure, and isolation. And yet, This intense pressure would ultimately force him to make choices that could redefine his relationship with the family, reshape his financial independence, and influence the narrative of his public persona. But just when Harry began to feel the weight of the storm, another twist emerged. Leaks, rumors, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering suggested that the inheritance cutoff was only one layer of a deeper, more complex plan within the royal family. Hidden motives, long-standing tensions, and subtle power plays were beginning to surface, creating a landscape of intrigue, speculation, and high-stakes decision-making. And the question hanging over it all was this: in a world where every private pain becomes public spectacle, where every action is scrutinized and misinterpreted, how does one navigate the delicate line between personal integrity, family loyalty, and public perception? What came next would take Harry from private frustration to public confrontation, force him to question loyalties, and reveal secrets that had long been buried behind palace walls, secrets that would shock the world. When the shock of the inheritance cutoff first hit, Harry's initial reaction was emotional: anger, hurt, disbelief. But as the days unfolded, it became clear that emotion alone would not suffice. The reality of losing access to substantial funds demanded careful consideration, strategic planning, and an understanding of the legal mechanisms at play. The royal family's finances are not just wealth. They are tightly controlled instruments, often embedded within trusts, estates, and legal stipulations that require expert navigation. And now, Harry was being forced to confront the full complexity of that system. The first step was understanding the exact nature of the cutoff. Royal inheritances are rarely simple cash transfers. They often involve trusts with precise rules about eligibility, behavior, and public duty. Some assets are liquid, others are tied to real estate, investments, or long-term estate holdings. In Harry's case, multiple trusts and provisions were implicated, each with its own stipulations, clauses, and contingencies. Determining which parts he could access, which were restricted, and whether any legal avenues existed to contest the decision required painstaking investigation. Harry's legal team immediately sprang into action. They analyzed trust documents, cross-referenced family agreements, and consulted financial experts to map the full scope of his inheritance. Every detail mattered: the timing of the cutoff, the language used in official communications, and even precedent set in other family cases could influence the strategy. In a family where formal documents often carry as much weight as verbal agreements, every nuance had to be scrutinized. At the same time, the emotional toll of this legal battle weighed heavily. Harry was not merely fighting for money. He was fighting for autonomy, recognition, and, perhaps unconsciously, validation. Legal proceedings are often impersonal, slow, and procedural, yet the stakes were intensely personal. Every step reminded him that financial control within the royal family is also a tool of influence, a way of reinforcing expectations, signaling disapproval, and managing behavior. Losing access to inheritance wasn't just about dollars, it was about power. And it wasn't just the legal technicalities that complicated matters. The media, already ablaze with speculation, monitored every development in real time. Headlines suggested impending lawsuits, legal maneuvers, and familial conflict, often exaggerating or misrepresenting nuances to create drama. For Harry, this meant that every legal step had to be measured against public perception. Move too aggressively, and it could appear combative or disrespectful. Move too cautiously, and critics might frame him as passive or weak. Navigating the interplay between legal strategy and media optics became a critical and exhausting challenge. Beyond media scrutiny, there were ethical and emotional questions. How far should Harry pursue legal action against his own family? Could money truly resolve the underlying issues, or would it only deepen rifts and breed resentment? In royal circles, financial disputes often intertwine with loyalty, tradition, and reputation. Legal maneuvers that might seem straightforward in other contexts carry symbolic weight in this world. Every decision could be interpreted as a statement about family allegiance, personal independence, or even defiance. The family dynamics added another layer of complexity. While some relatives may have sympathized with Harry's position, others were staunchly aligned with tradition and precedent. Navigating these dynamics required a careful balance between assertion and diplomacy. Legal action was not just a question of money. It was a question of messaging, perception, and long-term relationships. And in a family where subtle cues are often more powerful than direct confrontation, every move had to be calculated. Financially, the stakes were enormous. The inheritance in question was not just a cushion. It represented the freedom to make choices independent of public or familial expectation. Losing it meant adjusting lifestyle, reconsidering business ventures, and recalibrating long-term plans.